Hello, this is Vlad and a new story from my channel, Amazing Life Stories. Come on, calm down, Larissa called out. Both of them. The two boys, about to escalate from a verbal altercation to a physical one, turned to her. Their faces showed confusion and even a hint of offense. The younger one stepped forward decisively. "What's with both of them?" he asked defiantly. "Actually, Sasha started it. Every time we start figuring out who started it, it turns out it's you." Lara shook her head. "Well, you're long past kindergarten for that to matter." "Well, let's say he started it, and you be smart and finish first. Maybe I should apologize to that idiot too." Quote, the boy asked heatedly. "You should at least apologize to your brother for what you just said," Larissa replied sternly. "And I don't want to hear that in front of my brother again," her son snorted. "He's not even my brother. I don't understand why they took him from an orphanage. I heard it's only the children of alcoholics and criminals, who grow up just like him." Quote. Larissa exhaled slowly. How had he even known his brother was adopted? And where did his father's thoughts come from? She remembered vividly how she'd convinced her husband that they should adopt a child from an orphanage if they couldn't have their own, and heard him repeat the same arguments, word for word. It was possible, of course, to think that his father had instilled these thoughts in Kolia, but she didn't want to believe it. After all, he'd agreed to adopt Sasha. And, as far as Larissa could tell, he'd never regretted it, which meant he should have changed his mind. "How did you know about the orphanage?" she asked sternly. "We'll find out." It was Sasha, not he, who answered. "They'd found the documents on Dad's desk some time ago." "Maybe you want to talk about it?" Lara asked cautiously. "What's there to talk about?" Sasha waved his hand. "I think so. Since you took me in, it means you liked me for some reason. But what will come of this?" Quote. He waved his hand vaguely toward his brother. He made some kind of incomprehensible sound, probably expressing his indignation. And then the boys began fighting again. However, after watching them for a minute, Larissa realized with relief that it looked more like a friendly scuffle than a serious fight. And after a moment's thought, she decisively waved them off. "Let's blow off some steam and sort things out ourselves." Apparently, learning about her origins hadn't caused Sasha any trauma, and that was the most important thing. Frankly, the last thing Larissa wanted right now was to think about anything unpleasant or deal with any unexpected problems. After all, one of the most important days of her life was approaching. Her wedding anniversary. But not just any wedding anniversary, a major one. A whole 20 years together. Sometimes Laurie herself found it hard to believe it had actually happened, that they hadn't broken up after numerous fights or failed attempts to have a child. Although, of course, over all those years, there had been many times when they'd come dangerously close to that point. And yet, they'd managed to stay together for literally half their lives, and this gave her hope that everything would continue to be fine. Naturally, she was preparing for this day. Artyom suggested going out to a restaurant, but Lara rejected the idea. She wanted a warm, home-cooked dinner, decorating the apartment, preparing her signature dishes, and sitting down with the whole family, including the boys. Every detail of the upcoming anniversary had been carefully planned. Her husband could only shrug and leave all the celebratory arrangements to her discretion. It was a little sad. Larissa wanted him to take part in the preparations, but on the other hand, she understood perfectly well how busy he, a successful businessman, was at work. And then the joyous day arrived, not yet the day itself, but merely its eve. The final preparations remained. Some things needed to be set to prepare overnight, the house decorated, and a little tidying up. That's when Larissa discovered a mountain of unwashed clothes. How could she have forgotten about them? There was nothing else to do. She had to sort through this mess and carefully feed them into the washing machine, small batches at a time. The wash was in full swing when she discovered a rustling piece of paper in Artyom's jacket pocket. Taking it out, she realized it was a receipt. A closer look revealed that it had been issued at a jewelry store. The amount listed nearly made her sick. A pendant encrusted with a unique stone was listed on the receipt, followed by an amount with an absolutely indecent number of zeros. Could this really be a gift from her husband for their anniversary? But why so expensive? Especially considering that he, unlike his wife, seemed to see nothing special about the day. It was unknown where these thoughts would have led her if they hadn't been interrupted by the doorbell. She glanced down the hallway in surprise. Lara wasn't expecting anyone. She had to go answer it. And she could only hope that whoever was there wouldn't take up too much of her time. "Hello, Larissa, I hope I'm not bothering you too much. I'll just be a minute." Quote. Her friend stood at the threshold. They both worked for the local newspaper. Except Larissa was an artist, and Natasha was a real journalist. She was constantly busy with some kind of investigation and practically never had a minute to spare. That made her unexpected appearance all the more surprising. "No, not really," Larissa lied politely. "Come in, would you like some tea?" No. Natasha shook her head. "I'm in a hurry, work. And I don't want to disturb you, but I couldn't completely ignore your anniversary. Here, I've prepared a small gift." With these words, she held out a rustling package, wrapped in craft paper and quite heavy. Larissa examined it with curiosity. It was something new. Somehow, she and Natalia hadn't developed the habit of exchanging gifts, especially on such special occasions. "Just don't tell anyone it's from me," her friend suddenly said. "And don't show it, open it when you're sure you're alone." "Okay, I'm off, bye." Quote. Having scolded her friend, Natasha dashed off in an unknown direction, very much in her style. Larissa stood in the doorway for a while, examining the mysterious package, but then, coming to her senses, finally went into the apartment. Ultimately, no one but herself would finish the anniversary preparations. All the oddities that had befallen her in just a few minutes could be thought about later. And then the day had arrived. Lara had everything ready. Dinner was on the table, the whole family was gathered, candles, decorations, just as she had planned. Now, it seemed to her, nothing could ruin this perfect evening. They ate, talked, had fun, then sent the boys to bed and were left alone together. And now, Artyom smiled, "I want to give you a small gift." With these words, he rummaged in his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. Larissa's heart pounded with both joy and anxiety. Now she would see this pendant with her own eyes, incredibly expensive, with some unique stone. She accepted the gift and opened it, trying to stop the trembling in her hands. And inside the box, on a velvet lining, lay a heart-shaped gold pendant with a delicate pearl in the center. Yes, it was beautiful, sweet, and perfectly suited to her tastes. But it was completely different from the one her husband had paid a fortune for. She tried to hold back the tears that were threatening to spring to her eyes. It wasn't even that she hadn't received what she expected. It was just that a natural question arose. If that expensive pendant wasn't meant for her, then who was it for? And the thoughts on the matter were the most gloomy. She had to force herself to say something. Thank her, pretend everything was fine, or, on the contrary, inquire right then and there about the fate of that other pendant. Artyom must have read something in her face. Or maybe he was simply uneasy by the long silence. What, you didn't like it? He asked worriedly. And I thought it was just to your taste. Yes, very sweet, Lara agreed reservedly. But I expected something a little different. You see, I found a receipt in your jacket pocket. She stood up abruptly from the table and went to the nightstand, where she hid the treasured piece of paper. She handed it to her husband and began to watch his reaction. Artyom's expression remained practically unchanged. After a while, he looked up and, to her surprise, smiled broadly. You thought, he said, that I bought this pendant as an anniversary gift. What else was I supposed to think? Lara snorted. Well, you know, Artyom shrugged. Forgive me, but as for me, the occasion isn't very significant for such gifts. You know how I feel about that. Quote, why do we even celebrate a wedding anniversary, and not, say, the moment we met? It's all such convention. No, my dear, I prepared this pendant for a truly special occasion, say, for your birthday. Larissa looked at him intently. The explanation was poor. Her birthday was still more than 6 months away. And the anniversary? Well, it was right there. So why buy a gift so far in advance? It sounded somehow illogical. However, there was absolutely no desire to escalate the conflict. The rest of the evening passed awkwardly. Neither of them mentioned the ill-fated pendant again. But the tension hung in the air. Both were dissatisfied. And as soon as Artyom fell asleep, Larissa tiptoed out of the bedroom, then crept to the same ill-fated nightstand. Her husband never looked in it, and it was the perfect place to keep secrets. Usually, it held gifts for Artyom or the children, but now, buried under a pile of things at the very bottom, lay the mysterious package Natalia had given her. Lara herself didn't know why she decided to unwrap it now. Perhaps she was hoping that a small gift from her friend would somehow ease her disappointment from the evening. Opening the gift, she was surprised to find something unusual inside. At first glance, it looked like a flash drive, but she quickly realized it wasn't. The device looked too complicated. Some strange wires were running where they shouldn't have been. What was it? After fiddling with the packaging a bit more, Larissa finally found what she was looking for, a note. I understand how surprised you might be, Natasha wrote. And I don't know what exactly you expected to see. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of another way to safely hand you this thing. It had to be done without arousing suspicion. Quote, Larissa exhaled loudly, although in reality she wanted to scream. What, they were in cahoots there or something? Why do they have to turn such a bright and festive day into some kind of incomprehensible spy game? The thing you're holding. An audio recorder. A device for recording sound, a very good one, with a noise reduction system and wireless data transmission. I ask you to install this thing in your husband's office so that he won't notice it. I'm sorry, but I suspect that something is fishy in his affairs. Believe me. At this point, Larissa broke out in a cold sweat. She knew Natasha as a brilliant investigator who never did anything without reason and rarely made a mistake in choosing a target. Since it came to surveillance, it means she has serious grounds to suspect Artyom. Really? What? Clearly something not very good. Perhaps, if not for the incident with the check, Larissa would have simply dismissed her suspicions and, at their next meeting, advised her friend to find something else if she had nothing to do. But right now, she herself was ready to believe that something was fishy with her husband's affairs. She hesitated briefly before finally placing the device in an old, long-defunct lamp that had been gathering dust in her husband's office for years. She really didn't want to destroy her familiar world. But it was already cracking, and the only thing that could somehow glue it back together was, oddly enough, this very device. After all, if Artyom was innocent, he would prove it. Good afternoon, can I help you with something? The salesman's gaze was warm and friendly. However, Larissa could almost physically feel his eyes boring into her, assessing her. Was it okay? What she's wearing, how expensive her jewelry is, how much money she can leave in his shop if he's polite and convincing enough. She knew it would be like this, so she tried to pick out the best, things she only wore on big holidays. There's not much jewelry, but each one is worth several years of this salesperson's salary. The bigger the fish he considers her, the more willing he'll be to share information. Good morning, Laura smiled. Honestly, I think you can. You see, my parents are having a big anniversary soon, 50 years of marriage, and I'd like to find a suitable gift for them. Oh, it's a really important date, the consultant nodded. Would you like me to show you our services? Pure silver. Actually, no. Gold would suit you better. Or maybe you'd like to please them with some paired jewelry. To begin with, I'd like to find out the answer to one question, Larissa said thoughtfully. Quite a delicate one. You see, I think my husband has already come to your store with the same goal, and I didn't want the gifts to be the same. And he doesn't want to tell me exactly what he got for the gift. Well, like, a surprise. What kind of surprises are they? It's somehow illogical, the seller politely agreed. So you want to know what exactly he bought from me? Exactly, Larissa smiled. Look, this man came to see you. With these words, she showed him a photo on her phone, one of those taken at a photo shoot for their previous anniversary. She deliberately chose a joint photo so that there would be no doubt that she was interested in her husband. I remember him, the seller drawled. It seems he was here a couple of weeks ago, but I don't think his purchase has anything to do with your parents. He said he needed a gift for an important client. And, frankly, his choice surprised me. Although, who knows what kind of clients they are and how much they need to be cajoled. Do you mean an expensive pendant? Quote. As if by chance, Larissa asked. So you saw it? The salesperson said. No, not it. Larissa shook her head. Just the receipt. And I thought that this little thing could have been bought specifically for my mother, that's why I decided to contact you. Frankly speaking, yes. If it weren't for that phrase about the client, I would have thought that it was bought for someone else's mother, the salesperson said. It's so, you know, large, massive, with a large stone. Older women usually prefer those. I certainly wouldn't give you something like that. Well, the client could be an older woman, Laura smiled. That's true, the consultant agreed. But it's also possible that your husband was trying to trick me too. Who knows? Maybe he was embarrassed to admit that he was buying it for his mother-in-law. Okay, I understand, Larissa smiled. I'll look around then. If I happen to see the same pendant, you should let me know just in case. No, that's unlikely, the salesman shook his head. We only had one. Larissa leaned over the display case and pretended to carefully examine some jewelry. Her head was spinning. She tried to think logically, but it wasn't working very well. Everything was somehow unclear, and absolutely nothing added up. Artyom had bought a piece of jewelry more suitable for an older woman, and it clearly wasn't a birthday present. She couldn't stand such things, but it was also odd to assume he bought it for his mistress. She was hardly a woman of respectable age. She would likely be younger than his wife and even less fond of such jewelry. But then it became completely unclear why he'd bought this pendant as a gift for his mother. Or maybe he really was for a client, but it was somehow too expensive. Larissa tore her gaze away from the display case and looked out the window, trying to somehow connect all these disparate threads. She was struggling. And then she saw something that completely drove her from her thoughts. A car pulled up not far from the store. A very familiar car. She would have recognized Artyom's car among 1,000, even though she knew nothing about them. Larissa thought she should leave before her husband noticed her there. However, the next moment she literally froze in place. Artyom got out of the car, walked to the back door, and opened it. Then he offered his hand, and, leaning on it, a woman climbed out. A rather young brunette with a very striking appearance, exactly her husband's type. Larissa's heart went cold. Her suspicions about his mistress were coming true. Really? She tried to push the thought aside, trying to find some other explanation for what was happening. After all, maybe her husband, being a gallant man, had simply decided to give a colleague a ride home, or even a complete stranger in a difficult situation. But even this saving thought was quickly dashed by harsh reality. Artyom, standing near the car, chatted pleasantly with the woman for about 5 minutes, then handed her an envelope and, as a parting gesture, leaned toward her, clearly kissing her. Larissa no longer had any doubts. She returned home, completely lost, with no idea what to do next. Something in her soul screamed, "Leave him right now." But how? 20 years of life, 2 children. But was it really? Was it really necessary to cross out all of that just because her husband fell for someone else's charms? Or maybe it wasn't serious. Well, it happens. A man has fun on the side, and then still runs home. These two feelings warred within her, and Lara didn't know what to do. After all, if you think about it, that kiss didn't resemble a passionate, ardent expression of feelings. She, of course, didn't see the details, but it seemed to her that it didn't last long. And it wasn't a fact that it was on the lips. And maybe it will turn out that this girl is actually a niece or some distant sister. Or maybe she's just trying to calm herself down. Quote, "Mom," Kolia's voice suddenly pulled her out of these strange thoughts. "Sashka seems really bad." "What?" Sarah perked up. Quote, "Why do you think that?" "He's coughing constantly, like he's suffocating," her son said worriedly. "And his forehead is hot. The fever reducers don't seem to be helping." Larissa got up from her chair and followed Kolia worriedly into the nursery, immediately realizing her son was right. Sashka looked really bad, red as a lobster. He was sweating profusely and coughing incessantly, barely finding a moment to breathe. Quote, "It's cold," he complained, clearing his throat. And Lara clearly heard his teeth chattering. Sashka had been ill for over 2 weeks. Sometimes it seemed like he was getting better, but then everything would somehow roll back. The doctors prescribed various medications, but ultimately nothing helped. However, he had never felt as bad as he did now. With just one glance at her son, Larissa grabbed the phone and called an ambulance. The doctors arrived fairly quickly. They carefully examined the boy, and one of them, turning to her, stated, "You need to go to the hospital immediately." "I have no right to make any diagnoses, but I think it's pneumonia." "I'm with you," she said immediately. "Well, of course," the doctor nodded. "Me too," Kolia said unexpectedly. The doctor hesitated. "It's better for you to stay at home. You shouldn't go around the infectious diseases ward. You'll catch something yourself." "So what? How will your mother handle 2 sick children?" "Oh, it's like Mom can't catch anything," Kolia was indignant. "Sasha is my brother, so I have the right." "You'll have that right when you become an adult," Larissa snapped. "But for now, stay at home. Seriously, there's no point for you to be there. When it's possible, I'll take you with me." "Agreed?" Quote. Kolia nodded reluctantly. And Larissa, only sitting in the ambulance, suddenly realized her son called Sasha his brother and seemed genuinely worried about him. Yeah, she should have been happy about such a change in their relationship. But the circumstances were completely unfavorable. Larissa tried to convince herself that her son would be fine. After all, he was in the doctor's good hands. The preliminary diagnosis was certainly unpleasant, but in the 21st century, it was quite treatable. However, time passed, and Sasha showed no signs of recovery. His cough had been controlled, but his fever remained stubbornly high and refused to go down. The doctors did everything they could, but Larissa saw no results. Quote, "It's a complicated case," the attending physician explained sadly. "The bacteria that infected his lungs turned out to be very resistant to antibiotics. He's also allergic to some particularly strong medications. We're supporting him, trying to find the right treatment." "Couldn't you try harder?" Kolia exclaimed angrily, overhearing this conversation. "I only have a brother, and I don't want to be left without him." "You won't be left without him." Suddenly, a kind voice rang out from somewhere behind him. "There are very good doctors at this clinic, and I'm sure they'll save your brother." Lara and Kolia turned around in surprise. Directly behind them stood a man, tall but remarkably upright. Unlike many people of above-average height, he didn't slouch at all, which made him seem even more massive. He was dressed in simple jeans and a t-shirt, holding a bag. Quote, "Sorry for interrupting," he said in the same calm, friendly tone. "Anya, my daughter, is in this room. And the one across from her is probably Sasha," Kolia whispered to his mother. "They only have one girl in the room, a tall one." Despite his dismissiveness, there was genuine admiration in his tone. And Lara got the feeling that her son genuinely liked this Anechka. And upon learning that this man was her father, he immediately warmed up to him as well. From then on, they would meet occasionally when they came to visit their children. Larissa even developed a certain affection for this man. He seemed calm and reliable, and seemed to impart some of these qualities to everyone around him. Gradually, they began to talk and soon became very good friends. His name was Oleg. And, to Lara's surprise, it turned out he had previously worked as an investigator. She had thought such a gentle and kind man couldn't possibly be associated with such a profession. Quote, "Maybe that's why he left," Oleg smiled sadly when she shared these thoughts with him. "Now I work in corporate security. It's somehow calmer, and the pay is better." At first, after Sasha was hospitalized, Larissa's thoughts were exclusively occupied with him. But gradually, other problems began to return, like her mistress. And, no matter how you look at it, it was impossible to simply pretend nothing was happening. She dismissed the idea of talking to her husband almost immediately, knowing he would find a way to wriggle out of it, and even make it look like she was to blame. She wanted to find out the truth so she could understand her next steps. There was only one option left: talk to the girl she'd seen with Artyom. She wasn't planning on arguing or trying to sort things out. In a way, she even felt sorry for her. Larissa remembered her perfectly well at her age. Dreamy, romantic, capable of falling in love at first sight, truly and lastingly. And here was this man, accomplished, handsome, rich, and courteous. Yes, the poor thing might not even know he was married. Still, she needed to talk. If the girl really didn't know, it would be better for her. How could she quickly figure out who exactly she'd gotten involved with? One day, when Artyom was asleep, Larissa resolutely went through his phone. She'd never done anything like this before and felt very uncomfortable. Nevertheless, she was certain it was necessary. And, oddly enough, her supposed rival revealed herself quite quickly. There weren't many women in her husband's address book, but this one, affectionately signed, Lerachka, even had a photo added. A photo of that same girl. And besides her phone number, there was also an office address. This seemed rather odd. Why a work address and not a home one? For security's sake? Or was the girl smarter than Larissa thought and in no hurry to show a man she barely knew where she lived? Well, if so, it gave her hope that a deal might be reached. The very next morning, Larissa went there and found a small one-story house, entirely occupied by a single organization, a charitable foundation dedicated to helping children with serious illnesses. How on earth had Artyoma managed to connect with someone who worked at such a place? Quote, "Hello," Lara politely greeted the girl at the reception desk. "Can I see Valeria?" She was largely relying on luck. She knew nothing except perhaps her name. And even then, she couldn't be sure it was real. But if so, surely nothing more would be needed in such a small company. Quote, "What's the matter?" the secretary asked, without trying to clarify anything else. "Personal." "Well, we don't have any others here," the girl smiled a little sadly. "At least state your first name so we can identify you." After a brief hesitation, Larissa introduced herself. She also gave her last name. If her mistress knew her, she'd be more likely to agree to accept. Well, at least out of curiosity about the relationship of the stranger who had come to see her. The secretary meanwhile left, making a note in her notebook. She didn't have to wait long. The girl returned literally a few minutes later and gestured for them to enter the office. Lara felt triumphant. The first stage of her plan had succeeded, but at the same time, there was a certain dread. What would this conversation bring? Was she ready to hear it? Quote, "Hello," Valeria said calmly. She sat at her desk, her posture rather tense, staring intently at the uninvited visitor. Quote, "I understand you're Artyom's wife," she added. "Well, yes," Larissa said involuntarily, forgetting even to say hello. "So you know he has a wife?" "Of course I know," Valeria sighed. "A wife, 2 children, one of whom is adopted. It's simply beyond her comprehension how such a family man could commit such terrible acts. But nevertheless." Larissa suddenly realized that she didn't understand anything at all. Valeria's behavior, her words. It was as if she knew Artyom had a mistress, but she wasn't one herself, and as if she wasn't the least bit touched by the fact that her lover's wife had come to see her. Quote, "I don't understand," Larissa said, confused. "If you know everything and condemn my husband, how can you act like this yourself? I thought you were young, inexperienced, and didn't know what you were getting yourself into." To her surprise, Valeria laughed. It wasn't funny, though, more hysterically. "And I'm a young idiot who didn't realize what she'd gotten herself into for a long time. But I don't think you have a very good grasp of the situation either. Do you think I'm a mistress? I don't know what made you think so, but I'm not." Quote, "How so?" Larissa asked, unable to think of anything better. "I'm afraid when I tell you, you'll wish it wasn't an affair. Actually, Artyom started providing quite substantial support to our foundation some time ago. We all thought it was a real miracle. Such a wealthy man taking an interest in our affairs. Artyom got involved in charity work." Larissa raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Well, don't pull the wool over my eyes. Don't I know my husband? The last thing he'd spend money on is helping some other people's children." "Well, you see." Valeria shook her head sadly. "You know that, but I don't. I believe the man was genuinely concerned, but I only started to suspect it when the books stopped adding up. Well, there were a few other things. Anyway, that's when it became clear your husband had found an excellent cover for laundering money." Quote, "No," Larissa whispered. "He could have. He's certainly not the most sensitive person, but he's not a monster either. Alas, I'm not making this up. I even have some evidence, but I can't use it. It turns out I unwittingly became a participant in this scam. I don't even know what will happen to me if it all comes to light. He's probably got enough resources to blame me, but I can't. I have a nephew with a rare, very serious disease, and I'm trying to save him. Quote. Actually, I saw you in Artyom not long ago, near the jewelry store. Larissa was still clinging to the faint hope that the girl was lying, trying to cover up an affair. And you kissed. No, we didn't kiss. I was genuinely disgusted, Lyra exclaimed. He tried, of course, he's been trying to hit on me for a long time, but I'm not interested at all, especially after what I found out about him. Back then, he simply handed me some fake papers so the fund's reports would line up. He tried to kiss me, but I dodged him. Larissa looked her straight in the eyes and suddenly realized she believed every word she said. Everything in her story matched what had been happening over the past few weeks. And now, hearing the truth, she remembered something else: Natasha's strange gift. With everything that happened later, she'd practically forgotten about this trinket, but now she remembered. Lara realized that if she wanted to get to the bottom of this, she needed to talk to her friend. After all, she'd heard about Artyom's activities from somewhere. Besides, the recording device had been in her husband's office for several weeks. It must have recorded something. Quote. Hello. Lara greeted, entering her friend's office. Oh, what people. She smiled. You rarely show up at the editorial office. Just please don't tell me the boss has decided to declare war on remote work. I can't stand it. I need to work from home at least sometimes. And I'm not even mentioning the fact that, in general, reporting is impossible without going to the scene. Nothing will happen with your remote work, Lara snorted. I'm different here. Listen, I don't even know how to say this, but it's personal. Natasha sighed, calming him down. Tell me what's personal, because you and I haven't had a normal conversation for 100 years. You're all about family, I'm all about work. But Larissa said so thoughtfully here. We recently found out that my family and your work are almost the same thing. Well, yes. Natasha looked at her with a new, especially intent gaze. Is that what you mean? Listen, well, I should thank you for fulfilling my little request. The device is working properly, and, apparently, your husband doesn't suspect it. Honestly, I took a big risk, because it was impossible to understand how you'll behave, even though we're friends. But it seems to me, Larissa remarked meaningfully. Since I agreed to help you and you're convinced that I'm on your side, I deserve a little more. Oh God, Natalia exclaimed. I'll never believe that you're going to extort money from me. Why would you? Your husband may be a bad person, but he doesn't seem to be abusing me. Well, in material terms, what does money have to do with it? Quote, Lara asked, genuinely surprised. No, I need information. I want to understand what's going on, what my husband is being accused of, and why. Quote. For a while, her friend was silent and only continued to carefully examine her, as if she were seeing her for the first time in her life. Perhaps, in a sense, that was true. Previously, all their working interactions boiled down to Lara making illustrations for her articles, and everything in person to get-togethers after work. You only came to me now, she finally said. And I gave you the device a long time ago. Something must have happened. So what? You know, around the same time, Natasha sighed, I suspected my husband of cheating and found the girl I thought was his mistress. Basically, she disappeared, a really bad girl. Valeria, Natalia exclaimed, from the foundation. My God, it was she who gave me the tip about your RTOM. Interesting. Yes, she, said that her nephew is sick, Larissa nodded, and she doesn't want him to be left without her care. Well, yes, Natalia responded. Believe me, I checked this lady out first. So I only took up your husband's case when I realized that her words were true. So what? Did the wiretap yield anything? Let's find out together, Natalia suddenly suggested. She pressed a few keys on her computer, something the sound clicked and rustled through the speakers. And Larissa even thought she distantly heard her own voice uttering some unintelligible phrase, to which Artyom replied quite clearly and distinctly. Sorry, I have to work. Let's do it later and don't disturb me for the next half hour. Larissa could only vaguely recall what exactly had happened then. But Natasha must have specifically chosen this particular recording. Quote, Yes, I'm telling you, don't worry about it, I've got everything under control. The shipment will be processed as humanitarian aid for that stupid children's fund, without inspections and, of course, without any duties. Everything was as agreed, more crackling and rustling. And other than that, nothing. Pretty soon Larissa realized her husband was talking on the phone. And during these pauses, he was listening to what the other person was saying. Quote, Otherwise? Artyom said smugly. This is the Foundation's chicken with her idiot nephew. Count her in. There won't be any problems with her. Another pause. Don't worry about that either. I bought a rather expensive trinket, just for this occasion. And for it, the inspector will turn a blind eye, even if they notice anything. Do you know me? I'm working diligently now. Natasha turned off the recording. Lara stared at it, dumbfounded. She hadn't expected such an effect, although she seemed to have a rough idea of what she might have heard. So that's who that pendant was meant for, was all she could manage to say. Amid all this horror, a single bright spot emerged. Sasha was finally on the mend. The doctors had finally managed to find a treatment that wouldn't harm the child. Larissa came to visit her son again, and the doctor called her aside. Strictly speaking, we're ready to discharge him tomorrow. The treatment is working, so there's no need to keep him here any longer. Quote, Besides, the guy needs rest. You should make sure he avoids any stressful situations. Yes, if it must be said, Slara chuckled. Otherwise, all that joy now that his brother is recovering, he'll start picking on him again. If you tell him, I think he'll be more willing to believe it. Okay, I'll tell you, the doctor smiled. Lara smiled back. But she was thinking about something completely different. As with all her husband's schemes, she could be sure that her son wouldn't be subjected to any stress. You never know what could happen, and that made her very worried. But she couldn't find any reason to leave Sasha in the hospital, so she ended up returning home with a heavy heart. The next day, she had to bring her son to the apartment. A son who would clearly be safer somewhere else. Her husband was already working late at work, as usual. Now she realized he most likely didn't have a mistress. True, it didn't change anything. It was as if he was drifting further and further away from her. And there was absolutely nothing she could do about it. At that moment, her phone rang. Natasha, she answered almost happily. Do you have any news? Hello, Larissa, a completely unfamiliar voice answered. This is the police, Lieutenant Makarov. I don't know the victim's relationship to you, but your number was among the last dialed in her phone. Quote. The victim? Larissa asked, dumbfounded. What happened? I'm sorry, but Natalia, that's what you said, was hit by a car. Maybe you have some contact information for relatives, or Lara was practically not listening anymore. Quote. A cold sweat ran down her back. She was hit by a car. Larissa could have sworn it. This was no accident. Her friend was hit deliberately, precisely because she was going to go to the police. And now Eva needs to report it too. But who will listen to her? After all, Larissa hadn't the slightest idea where her friend had kept the evidence, and it was unlikely she'd find it that easily. Natasha wasn't stupid enough to keep such things in plain sight. Somehow, she gave the police officer the information he needed. She even found Natasha's mother's number. However, knowing a little about their relationship, she was sure it would be useless. She reported this to the police officer, in turn extracting information from him about where exactly her friend had been taken. Then Valeria called her and nervously declared that she no longer intended to participate in their common cause. You understand, I have a nephew, she said. And there were clearly tears in her voice. And now, after this attempt on the journalist's life, you understand that this is an attempt. Now the stakes are greater than before. My life could be at risk. What's more, the life of an innocent child. It's almost the same thing. Who will take care of Lyosha if I'm gone? Do you think it will be safer if these people remain free? Quote. Larissa asked. Do you think they'll stop? Then we'll leave, Lyra declared decisively, heading to another city, where we won't be found. They'll follow you everywhere, Larissa predicted gloomily. How can you not understand? These are truly terrible people. And to prevent them from harming anyone else, they need to be sent to prison for a long time, so that no one gets out, or gets out very soon. But, Lyosha, Valeria was already openly sobbing. I can't expose him to such danger. After my brother died in the plane with his wife, I'm the only one he has left. Quote. Listen, Larissa said as gently as possible. I have 2 sons and at least 1 stepchild of my husband. Do you really think I don't worry about them? Quote. But I understand, the only way to ensure safety is to put the criminals behind bars. You're probably right, Valeria muttered. Okay, we'll stay, but I really want this to be over. Everyone wants that, quote. Still just as softly, Larissa responded. And I'll try my best to make sure that's exactly what happens. These weren't empty words. She truly intended to act, and as decisively as possible. Only one option occurred to her. It was, of course, awkward to turn to a colleague for help, since the children's lives were at stake. And Larna, as a father himself, would understand her concerns perfectly. And she was right. After listening to her story, Oleg said he was ready to get involved and, what's more, to involve his police connections. So the case moved forward quite quickly. Witnesses were found who had seen the car leaving the scene of the accident. Part of his license plate was splattered with mud, but Laura unmistakably recognized her husband's car from the general description. This was sufficient grounds to arrest Artyom. He had made a deal with the investigators and given up all his accomplices. He had also hired a rather competent lawyer. He tried his best to make it look like his client had accidentally hit someone and then left the scene because he panicked. The case, seemingly so obvious, was falling apart right before their eyes. There was insufficient evidence against Artyom. Moreover, Lyra had become stubborn again, refusing to testify in court. With great difficulty, Larissa finally managed to get her back for the stand, thereby at least delaying her husband's release. "Wake up, please," Larissa begged Natasha, sitting by her hospital bed. "We can't do it without you. Only you know where all the evidence is." Quote. But her friend remained deaf to her persuasion. However, as Laura noticed, one of the orderlies showed obvious interest in Natasha. It was thanks to him that the girl regained consciousness. As it turned out later, Dmitri talked to the patient in a coma every night, simply telling her about his life, his own difficulties, and his victories. And when Natasha woke up, she told Larissa the location of the hiding place. Larissa also presented the records found there to the court. Nothing could be done against such evidence. So Artyom, like his accomplices, received a hefty sentence. Larissa, having divorced her husband, soon began dating Oleg, and then married him. They had a large and close-knit family, raising 3 children, just what Larissa had always dreamed of. And Natasha, after some time, linked her life with Dima. If you like the story, please support me with the thumbs up button. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. All the best.